Hello, this is Gray Hughes of Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube. If you could please hit that like button right out of the gate, because of course this will be one of the greatest videos you've ever seen. This video today is another video in the series that I'm putting out of just basing discussions and thoughts on the factual information in the case, not wild, crazy conspiracy theories involving, you know, a guy named Brent Kopaka, etc., 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 the three guys walking at Banfield. I mean, the list goes on and on, everybody. Those things have absolutely nothing to do with this case. Apparently, I'm being paid by higher powers to cover up the real story in this case. Basically, it's exactly the same as the Kenneka Jenkins case. In that case, I would try to show people using the surveillance footage that I purchased. They made it available for people. If you send in, I think, around $60, you got a external hard drive with all the surveillance footage. After putting it all together, you could see that that case was an accidental death. But people weren't able to accept that. It had to be a murder because it makes it so much more interesting for everybody. And so then eventually I got accused of working for the Chicago Police Department, that I was at the scene and I was walking around, etc., etc., etc. So just the same crazy people show up in cases where people want to create a alternate story from reality. And of course, the people that are putting out the factual information are working for some higher power so that they can separate themselves. Don't you guys find that ludicrous? Right. So this video today is going to be about, was the K-bar knife sheath left intentionally? I asked what your opinion was on the last video, but I think on this one we will discuss it. The last video I made was, was Bryan Kohberger paranoid because of the DNA found on the knife sheath? Here is a K-bar knife sheath with the Eagle Globe USMC. Looks sort of like this. Here's that snap. And apparently the DNA was found on the bottom side of the snap. And you can see how somebody might miss that. I mean, there should have been his touch DNA all over it. But why was it just on the snap? Now, a lot of people go, oh man, touch DNA, that can come from anywhere. So sometimes when you find touch DNA, it doesn't have a significant meaning because of the location it was found. In this case, the DNA was found on a knife sheath that was left at the crime scene between 4:08 and 4:20, and we know that Bryan Kohberger has a white Elantra missing a front license plate, one that looked exactly like the vehicle driving around in the neighborhood. So the DNA on the knife sheath matched Bryan Kohberger. But the question is, did he leave it there intentionally? Let's take a look what it says in the objection to the state's motion for a protective order. It says, on November 13, 2022, law enforcement responding to a 911 call found Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin deceased. Law enforcement later found a K-bar knife sheath placed next to Miss Mogen on her bed. Now, when it says placed here, I don't know if they mean that it was literally placed there intentionally, or it was just that's where it was, and that's the term this person writing this is using. The sheath was placed button side down and partially under Miss Mogen and the comforter. On November 20th, 2022, the Idaho State Police Lab in Meridian, Idaho located DNA on the button of the sheath and performed STR analysis that led nowhere when ran through CODIS. That means he just wasn't in CODIS already. We read this in the prior video that I made, but this is associated with this video regarding did he intentionally leave the knife sheath there. Also in the warrant, it discusses the knife sheath as well. As I entered this bedroom, I could see two females in the single bed in the room. Both Goncalves and Mogen were deceased with visible stab wounds. I also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Mogen's right side when viewed from the door. The sheath was later processed and had K-bar USMC and the United States Marine Corps Eagle Globe and anchor insignia stamped on the outside of it. The Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA left on the button snap of the knife sheath. Now right here, this part says when viewed from the door. They're just giving you an orientation. It doesn't mean when you open the door you could see the knife sheath sitting there. It means that when you're viewing the bed from the door, it was on Madison Mogen's right side. And if we take a look at that right here, when you go up the stairs, in that probable cause document, it mentions how they went into Kaylee's room first. And then this is Madison's room. And then from the door, if you were just to come into the door, it was on Madison Mogen's right side. She's the one I have indicated in pink there. And so the knife sheath was likely underneath like a quilt right here, partially, and next to her right side. And that's where they retrieved the knife sheath, and it had Bryan Kohberger's DNA on it. Now let's take a look at this article that was in the Daily Mail, where they're quoting a criminology professor from Birmingham City University in the UK. He suggested the Idaho quadruple murder suspect may have left a knife sheath at the crime scene as part of a remarkably clever move to get off the hook, a criminologist suggested. And he said down here, Wilson said much of the evidence against Kohberger could be framed as coincidental by the defense, including Kohberger's DNA found on the sheath, which he said transfers very easily between people and objects. Now, I'm not really sure what's remarkably clever about that. Why not just leave the knife sheath without your DNA? Then there's no association with you whatsoever. I don't really understand that element of it, but he is suggesting in this article that he may have left it there intentionally. It says he's way too smart to leave evidence behind, and that he may have done so as a tactic. I don't think Kohberger is a genius of any kind. I think he is just average person, didn't really think through some of the elements, even though he's a criminology student. But some of the stuff he did, he pulled off pretty well, and maybe his schooling helped him in those elements, you know, like the DNA found in the car. You know, sounds like there might not have been any found in there. You know, cleaned it up really well, or took steps to mitigate the transfer of DNA into his vehicle, things like that. But I don't really understand in this situation here where you're saying it's a clever move to get off the hook. I don't see how there's any cleverness about it. Now, to determine whether or not it was left intentionally or not, or what your opinion is, let's look at what a calling card is. A calling card is a particular object, sometimes left behind by a criminal at a scene of a crime, often as a way of taunting police or claiming responsibility. All right. Now, I believe a calling card is a type of signature. And the reason I think that, if you look at this, this is another explanation. All of the links from where I found these things will be in the description. Here are a few examples of criminal MO. So there's MO, and there is criminal signatures. All right, so let's take a look at these. These are MO. This just means like the procedural sort of, you know, modus operandi of how to actually commit the crime itself. Like, what tools would you need? The type of restraints used on the victim, wound patterns, and type of fiber of the restraints. Type of weapon used, such as knife, blunt object, or gun. Tape found on victim that was used to bind hands and cover mouth. Tools used to gain entry to victim's home. Attack could be from when the victim exits their vehicle or walks through a dark parking garage. Time of day that the offender chooses to commit the crime, such as nighttime or early morning. Lack of fingerprints that would indicate the offender used gloves. And says all of these examples constitute a criminal's MO in committing a crime. A signature refers to the distinctive behaviors that help to serve the criminal's psychological and emotional needs. Physical evidence helps to establish the signature behaviors of the criminal who committed the specific crime. Again, the investigator or detective for a homicide case would refer to the forensic analysis for this type of evidence in regard to the signature behavior at the crime scene. Here are a few examples of criminal signature. Level of injury to the victim, minimal or excessive. You know, like you could look at Ted Bundy, how he clubbed people just viciously over and over again. specific location or sequence to the criminal act, ejaculation, urination, and or defecation at the crime scene, specific type of weapon used, and as you remember up here in the MO it says type of weapon used. So that's a crossover there. So up there they might have used a specific type of weapon to achieve what they were doing, but then down below in a signature, the specific type of weapon used, for example, in this case, maybe a K-bar knife. Personal items taken from victim. Specific type of victim targeted that refers to age, race, occupation, or other physical characteristics. Anything specifically left at the crime scene, such as a note or object. And as you can see, that's a little different than the other types of signatures. An object left, I think, is a calling card, and that's a type of signature, but it's really more specific to taunting police, letting them know that you were there. The other signatures might not be something that the criminal is aware of. The way he viciously attacks over and over again, he might not realize that that itself would be a signature to his type of crime and lead back to him. The calling card is specifically left there by the criminal to communicate who they are and maybe taunt police, like I just mentioned a moment ago. And this is what you might be able to consider a possibility in the Idaho4 murder case, where Bryan Kohberger perhaps left the knife sheath there intentionally. So let's take a look at some of the arguments for and against this. Now we do know that Kohberger went back to the crime scene at 9 in the morning. He drove from Pullman, Washington, and came into the area at 9 a.m. 9:15 or so is when he was back in Moscow. Was he there to look for the knife sheath? Some people suggest that that's why he went back there. I don't think that's why he went back there. I think at 9 a.m. most people would believe that after a huge murder like that, with 4 people murdered, just a brutal crime, that there would already be law enforcement in the area. I mean, I guess it's possible he went back to check to see, but there was nobody there from law enforcement. So why didn't he go up into the room and look for it? Now, was he looking for it just outside, driving around? Maybe he dropped it. Wouldn't it be interesting to see if he shows up on the Linda Lane camera at 9:15 or so? That would be crazy if he drove back around there. Then I might buy that he went there looking for the missing knife sheath. Another thing you might want to take a look at is it appears, based on how the document was written, that there was just a single source of DNA found in the knife sheath. It didn't mention that there were mixtures or anything like that. So the knife sheath was pristine. It means that there was no DNA on the knife sheath anywhere other than on the snap, and apparently was on the bottom side of the snap, a place he might have missed when cleaning it. It's possible that he ordered the knife sheath on Amazon with the knife, and when he got it, he perhaps used gloves, but maybe he was careless at one point. Maybe one of the gloves transferred his own DNA onto the snap. Regarding purchasing the knife sheath on Amazon, there were indications that that's a possibility of what happened. And what if he ordered a K-bar knife sheath to leave there intentionally to merely throw law enforcement off because the weapon he used wasn't a K-bar knife? It was actually a weapon similar or could do the same kind of destructive damage, but what if it wasn't a K-bar knife that he used, but he left the K-bar knife sheath there intentionally to throw people off as to which weapon he used? You have to admit it's pretty interesting that if he didn't intend to leave the knife sheath there, why would he care to have such a pristine knife sheath? He would have just taken it with him. It wouldn't have been left there, and his DNA wouldn't be found on it. Now, you could make the argument of if he touched it a lot and then that knife sheath touched something at the crime scene, maybe he would transfer his DNA from the knife sheath. But I think that's an indication that he intended to leave it there, that he just missed this tiny little portion of DNA on the knife sheath. Let me know in the comments section, do you think he went back at 9 a.m. to look for the knife sheath? I think he went back to observe the crime scene and get a thrill out of seeing law enforcement at the scene. That's something a lot of criminals do. They show up at the crime scene when law enforcement is working the area, and sometimes they're just there to see what they might be able to find out, if it's leading towards them in any way at all, or they're there to get a thrill out of it, especially people like arsonists. Like, they're there and they just love to see all the mayhem that they caused. And I think that's what Kohberger was doing when he went back between 9 and 9:30 to Moscow, Idaho. He went there to get a thrill. So those are different ways to look at that. So let me know in the comments what you think about that. Do you think he went back to look at it as a thrill, or was he going back to look for the knife sheath? You would think that he would have been aware of the missing knife sheath way earlier, though, wouldn't you? He got home around 5:30ish in the morning. Wouldn't he already know that he doesn't have his knife sheath? He has the knife and the knife sheath. It seems like that would have been the better time to drive back over there. Maybe he had too much adrenaline, too much fear at that point, and then later decided to go around 9. Now, another argument for it being left there accidentally would be that inside the house at 1122 King Road, when the killer went upstairs, and let's say he killed Madison and Kaylee first, and I'm basing this on the probable cause document. If he went upstairs and killed Madison and Kaylee first, so let's say he goes into Ethan and Xana's room and he kills them, and then after exiting the room, he's looking where to put his knife back in a sheath, and he can't find it. So at this point, he is wondering where the hell his knife sheath is. And then he goes back upstairs because he couldn't find it. Let's say he looked around in Xana and Ethan's room right there, Xana's room, but Ethan was staying with her. He looks around, he can't find it. So then he goes back upstairs. Let me go up the stairs right here. It goes upstairs, and then he looks for the knife sheath. And he can't find it because it's tucked under there. It's dark. He thinks it might be on the floor somewhere. He's just kind of looking around for it, but he doesn't see it. And then he heads back down the stairs. Could it be at this point where this comment in the probable cause document becomes relevant? Mortensen stated she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house. Mortensen stated she opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. Mortensen then said she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." And then at approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at 1112 King Road, which is right here, that's this house right there, 1112 King Road. This is 1122 King Road right there. And this building here, the house, has a surveillance camera on it that picked up the white launcher coming in, etc. But it also picked up the sounds of whimpering voices and a dog barking numerous times. So let's just read that portion again. At 4:17, security camera located at 1112 King Road. A residence immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road picked up distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. So this is something that's always bothered me. We know that Ethan Chapin wouldn't say to Xana, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," or "It's okay, I'm going to help you." You wouldn't say that. Because when Kohberger attacked, he attacked Xana and Ethan, and it would have, both of them would have been grievously wounded. And it's not like, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," would be said by Ethan. I think it is Bryan Kohberger saying that, and he's trying to calm down Xana. And I think it's after if it is true that he left the knife there accidentally, then perhaps that would explain how this happened. So after killing Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves, he goes downstairs, and there's a confrontation with Xana and Ethan, and they're killed. Or at least he thought they were killed. Then he goes upstairs looking for the knife sheath really quick. Just looks around really. He's trying to get the hell out of this house at this point. He doesn't find it. Then he goes back down the stairs. So let's see, right here, he goes back down the stairs. And then right now he hears whimpering coming from Xana's room. And he knows that she has seen him. So he goes back in there and says, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," to keep her quiet. And then he kills her, finishes her off, and then you hear the thud on the ground. And then that's when he came right back out this direction and then left the area. So he would have came right through here. This is Dylan's room. So this door would be just a crack open. She saw him coming, Kohberger, just like this. And then he takes her right down through the kitchen. And if I was just to play it, it would be like this. This is where Kohberger went, and then he left out the sliding glass door. But just to the right there is Dylan Mortensen's room, and that door was likely like, something like this. So she sees him coming, the bushy eyebrows, wearing a face mask, takes a right and leaves just after killing Xana Kernodle. Now, is that the second time he went there? And if so, I think then you could make an argument that he did that because he went back looking for the knife sheath. I doubt that after attacking them the first time that he was going to stay around in the house doing whatever. He just would have left immediately. So he had something else that he would have had to go do, giving him time to then hear Xana whimpering, and goes back in there and says, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." And then he kills her for good this time, and then he exits the living room, then the kitchen, and then out. And that would be just like this, out the door. And then he goes up the bank, and then goes into his vehicle, and then leaves at a high rate of speed at 420. And then we know that 9 in the morning he goes back over there, and we don't know what the reasoning for going back over there was. My opinion is that he went back over to observe the mayhem at the crime scene and get a thrill from it. And there are other people who think that he went back there to find the knife sheath. In the last video, one of the things we discussed was paranoia. Leaving the knife sheath there accidentally would have dramatically increased his paranoia, especially when we've already got a white Elantra mentioned. That was probably already something he was a little bit paranoid about, but he felt okay because he knew that he was changing his license plate, and how could you tell it was his car, etc. But then, when he went home and he was pulled over twice by police, that would have just dramatically increased the paranoia. And now if he left the knife sheath there accidentally, it would be, magnitudes more paranoid. I mean, he would be just absolutely paranoid out of his mind, leaving a knife sheath there accidentally, knowing that it was a white Elantra, and he gets pulled over twice, and then it starts leading to him putting gloves on, separating his trash, and putting it into different garbage cans of neighbors. Now, if he left it there intentionally, again, with the license plate, he changed it on his vehicle. If he left it there intentionally, he thought he really cleaned that well, but then when he was pulled over, he probably realized that he didn't clean that well enough, the knife sheath, and it led to him, because those cops pulled him over twice, and that's why he's separating his own DNA from the family trash and putting it into neighbors' trash, which is kind of naive anyways, because the DNA would lead back to a sister or a parent of his. So, his thinking was flawed. And right there, that is something that is a fact that he was doing. And that shows you that he's not as brilliant as everybody tries to make him out to be. There's a lot of things he didn't do right in this case. Turning his phone on at 4:48, driving by multiple cameras, and leaving a knife sheath there that wasn't cleaned all the way. So let me know in the comments what you guys think about this. I think it's very possible he left that knife sheath there as a calling card, as a signature, but I can see it not being that too. I'm not absolutely married to the idea, but I could definitely see it being that. I could see later on, you know, when he was arrested finally after all the murders he was going to be doing, he'd be called Kohberger the K-Bar Killer. You know, maybe he wanted it to be something like that. The problem here is we don't have a large enough sample size because it's just one murder he was able to do. Would he have left a knife sheath at other scenes in the future? Dennis Rader left a calling card at each of his crime scenes. The smiley face killer also left a calling card signature. And then also the Zodiac killer would leave this symbol at each of the crime scenes. Do you believe that Bryan Kohberger left the knife sheath as a signature, much like these other killers did in the past? He just wasn't able to move on to a second murder where he would have left the knife sheath. I guess we'll never know, because he will never be able to kill again. So if you could leave a comment in the comment section and hit that like button for me, I would really appreciate it. Thank you all very much for watching. And as I always say, until next time, be safe out there.